Find out, and let's go.
On April 10th, 11th, and 12th of 2003, the Iraq National Museum in Baghdad was systematically looted. Approximately 15,000 antiquities were removed. United States military tanks were stationed roughly 100 yards from the museum during all 3 days of looting, and they did not intervene. When the formal investigation began in mid-April, the man running it, a U.S. Marine Reserve Colonel named Matthew Bogdanos, found something that didn't fit. The looters, they didn't just smash their way through the public galleries grabbing whatever they could. They had bypassed the public galleries entirely, and they had gone directly to a basement-level storage room. And from that basement-level storage room, they removed roughly 5,000 ancient Sumerian cylinder seals. So 23 years later, every other category of looted Iraqi artifact has eventually surfaced somewhere. On the antiquities black market or in private collections, in repatriation databases, the 5,000 cylinder seals are the exception. They're still missing. And by the end of that year, an exopolitics researcher in Washington, D.C. named Dr. Michael Sala had written a paper hypothesizing that the invasion of Iraq was not about Saddam Hussein, weapons of mass destruction, or oil, but about extracting something else. You won't want to miss this one. Most of you know that I recently had a new addition to the family, and along with all the wonderful things that...
So, if everything was about the Stargate and not about oil, what have they done with it? They've had it for fucking 23 years. Did he say it was 2003, I think he said. It's 23 years ago. What have they done with the Stargate? What have they fucking done?
In this box is the Momotion Luba 3 AWD, and this is the robot mower that's going to cut the grass for me.
Museum in Baghdad. Let's get back to the episode.
Unless they started COVID and all the other crazy shit in the last 23 years is all due to them fucking around with some kind of Stargate. That would be crazy. Let's find out.
In the middle of April of 2003, Colonel Matthew Bogdanos walked through the smashed front entrance of the Iraq National Museum in Baghdad. The looting had hit the museum 6 or 7 days prior. And Bogdanos, he was the man the U.S. Department of Defense had assigned to figure out what had been taken. And
it's sad when shit just gets looted and destroyed. It's like, bro, this shit's thousands of years old, bro. Like, why break it? I've never really understood that shit. Like, why break it?
By who? In civilian life, Bogdanos was a Manhattan assistant district attorney. He had done classics at Princeton, he spoke very fluent Arabic, and so the way Bogdanos walked into a crime scene was the way that a prosecutor walks into a crime scene. Methodically, slowly, and looking at what was there and what wasn't. And what was there in those first few hours was a museum that had basically been turned inside out. The front doors had been smashed, the display cases and the public galleries had been broken open, and there was paperwork strewn across the floor. There were boot prints. The 17 guards that had been assigned to the museum had fled around April 8th after U.S. tanks had fired on the museum facade during a firefight in the area. Director Dr. Nawala had handed over the keys and evacuated by April 6th. So by the time Bogdanos got there, the staff was gone, the building was empty, and something very, very strange had occurred inside. Now, Bogdanos' first instinct as a prosecutor was to walk the public galleries and figure out what had been taken from the display cases. And that's what he did. And as he did this, he began to notice that there really weren't a lot of things missing. The looting in the public galleries, of course, was real, but it wasn't comprehensive. I mean, some of the most valuable pieces, we're talking about pieces that any random thief would have grabbed first, were still sitting where they had always been. The looters, whoever they were, had clearly been here, but they hadn't taken everything they could have. Bogdanos kept walking, and he went deeper into the museum, and eventually...
That's crazy. Isn't that part of the Babylonian Gate? Is that part of Babylon? I'm pretty sure it is. Or Assyria. Is it Syrian? I can't remember. Babylon or Assyria, I think.
he ended up
Let
in
me
the
know in the
basement.
comments.
Now, the basement of the Iraq National Museum was not a public-facing space. This was a storage working area. We're talking about climate-controlled rooms, cabinets, locked doors, holding the museum's reserve collection. Most visitors had never been down there, and most staff hadn't either. It was the kind of space where basically the only people who go in are the people who work there. And when he went down there, what he found is that this is where the actual operation had taken place. Now, there was a specific room, and in that room, a specific cabinet. And on top of that cabinet, in small boxes, a curator named Dr. Lamia Al-Ghalani had kept ancient Sumerian cylinder seals, small carved cylinders thousands of years old from the cradle of the earliest written civilization on Earth.
Bro, what's inside them? They look like little jars. Is that what it is? Little jars? They just look like jars. Like, you're gonna open them and there's a bunch of fucking writing inside it or something.
Bogdanos knew about the boxes because Dr. Al-Ghalani would later tell him, and the boxes were now empty. And so the question that Bogdanos was sort of standing there asking himself was that in the basement of a museum whose layout nobody outside the staff was supposed to know was the same question Dr. Al-Ghalani would later put to a BBC reporter in 2016. How did the looters find it unless they knew where it was? Now, Bogdanos' investigation didn't stop at the basement, though, because as he started doing the work, interviewing surviving staff, counting cabinets, walking through inventory records line by line, tracing the chain of who had keys and who knew about the layout, he began to realize that the museum was just one piece of a much bigger pattern. The damage to the Iraqi heritage was not localized. It was basically systemic, and it was happening in places that, militarily speaking, didn't really make a whole lot of sense. Take Talil Air Base. This sat on the southern Iraqi steppe, and right next to it, almost on top of it, was the Great Ziggurat of Ur. Now, this ziggurat is a stepped pyramid roughly 4,100 years old, and it is one of the oldest and most significant standing structures in the entire history.
Bro, that looks crazy. Why isn't this talked about more? I didn't even really know this existed. Isn't this like a... Bro, how is this not the base of the Tower of Babel? Am I tripping? Like, does this not look like the base of the Tower of Babel? I swear it's in the same location as well. Where did he say it? The city of I'm pretty sure that's like in the same local area as where they think the Tower of Babel was. How is this not... How do people not think this is it? Or the base of it, and then it was probably built on top.
Of human civilization, predating, basically every recognizable empire that ever stood up and called itself an empire. Now, the U.S. securing Talil Air Base on day one of the invasion was not by itself the strange part. Talil was a strategic asset. What was weird was that public access to the Ziggurat of Ur was closed off the same day, and it would remain closed off for the next 6 years. And then there was Babylon. In April of 2003, U.S. forces built a 150-hectare military camp directly on top of the ruins of Babylon. The capital of Nebuchadnezzar's empire, U.S. tanks rolled across the brick pavement of the Ishtar Gate, the gate that had been the main ceremonial entrance into the inner city of Babylon. Pavement that was 2,500 years old, laid down during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar and crushed it. And of course, there was what was happening on the human side around Talil. Callie Rubai, who is a Purdue University anthropologist, has documented birth defects clustered around the Talil area in concentrations not seen anywhere else in the country, and none of it part of Bogdanos' museum investigation, but all of it part of the institutional weight that was settling into place around what the U.S. forces had decided to secure first and what they were apparently willing to leave on the ground after they did. And so Bogdanos wrote the report, it was sourced, it quoted Dr. Lamia Al-Ghalani by name, and it listed every artifact case the looters had visited and everyone that they had skipped. And in the end, it came to two conclusions. The first was that the early news figure of 170,000 stolen items was, in his words, a gross exaggeration. because the actual figure was closer to 15,000. So that means the looting wasn't as comprehensive as the wire reports were saying. Now, the second conclusion was the one that really mattered.
Before I became a dad, I realized I can't just keep ignoring my pension because it wasn't just my future anymore. Like most people,
mattered. The thieves, in Bogdanos' own official language, had intimate knowledge of the museum's security practices. They had breached the basement level storage rooms.
Well, they probably used to work there. I mean, yeah, they're probably ex-workers.
They emptied these specific boxes on top of it, and they had walked out with these cylinder seals. So that means the report was filed, it entered public record, and the question of why the U.S. tanks parked outside the building had watched the looting happen for 3 days and not intervened, well, that wasn't a question a Marine Reserve colonel running a museum investigation was really assigned to answer. That wasn't really a question nobody in uniform was assigned to answer. But somebody else, half a world away, somebody who wasn't in uniform, was already writing a paper that proposed an answer. In the fall of 2003, in a small home office in Washington, D.C., a researcher named Dr. Michael Sala sat at a desk and worked his way through the news coming out of Iraq. He was heavily watching what the governments weren't saying out loud about Iraq. What he was reading, basically, was the same wire reports that everybody else was. The looting, the seals, the tanks being 100 yards away, the ziggurat closed off the day Talil was secured. The major difference here was what he was doing with it. And the more he looked at all the information, the more it didn't fit into any standard explanation. I mean, the official frame for the invasion had been weapons of mass destruction. I mean, that was the headline frame. There were a couple of secondary frames, like regime change, oil security, regional restructuring, that were either openly stated or pretty heavily implied. But none of those frames really explained why the U.S. military had moved with such specific urgency to secure ancient archaeological sites. Weapons of mass destruction don't live inside a 4,000-year-old ziggurat. The 4th Infantry Division didn't need to bold...
I'm not gonna lie, bro. Why not? Like, if he was... That's exactly why he would put them there. Because of what he just said. They're not gonna be there. That's exactly why you would put them there. I'm not saying that they were there. I'm just saying, like... You put stuff in place. If you're trying to hide something, you're going to put it where you don't think anyone's going to think it is, right? No one's going to think it's in there. It's going to be in there. It's logic. But yeah, I'm not even saying that there was weapons of mass destruction. I don't know if there was or not. I kind of think there wasn't, to be honest. But I think it was all about oil. I don't know about this Stargate. But it's only halfway through the video, so let's fucking find out, boys. We might actually see some fucking alien tech right now. Let's go.
Used the Ishtar Gate to overthrow Saddam Hussein. And whatever you think about the oil thesis, oil isn't sitting in a basement-level storage cabinet at the Iraq National Museum either. And so Salah began writing a paper. And folks, do you know what that paper was called? Saddam or Stargate? What is the Task Force 20's main objective? Now, to be clear, Task Force 20 was a real named public unit, a joint special operations command element deployed into Iraq during the invasion.
Also, man, if Iraq had access to a fucking Stargate in 2003, they would have been one of the, at least top 3, top 4 superpowers in the world, but they won't. Bro, listen, if your country's got a Stargate, you're number 1. You're the number 1 country in the world. So I don't know, bro. Unless they just didn't know how to use it. Maybe they have a Stargate, they didn't know how to use it. Fuck knows. Let's find out.
Specifically to hunt high-value targets and recover sensitive material. That was on public record. So what Salah was proposing was about the sensitive material actually was. His hypothesis basically ran like this, that Saddam Hussein, in the years before the invasion, had actually been working with Russian, German, and French archaeological teams on something big. That the teams had been excavating in Iraq.
That's a weird combo of countries. What's France doing in there?
That Saddam Hussein, in the years before the invasion had actually been working with Russian, German, and French archaeological teams on something big. That the teams had been excavating in Iraq, and their work, Saleh argued, had converged on the recovery and study of an ancient Sumerian portal device. The cylinder seals were not, in this reading, decorative artifacts. They were...
Listen, in case you don't know, this motherfucker is crazy. I think this is Saddam Hussein's son. Why is he not doing the circle up there? Wait, it won't let me do it up there. That is weird. But yeah, that's Saddam Hussein's son, this brother. And this guy, 2 times as crazy. If you want, I'll check a documentary about him soon. But he was up to all kinds of fucking antics. Is he alive still? I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below. Maybe he's still getting up to all kinds of crazy shit. But I don't know. Who's this guy? Let's go.
Or schematics, reverse engineered technical documentation, encoded into the actual iconography of Sumerian writing. The 5,000 seals Bogdanos' report had isolated were, in Saleh's hypothesis, the documentation set. The invasion, the museum looting, the closure of the ziggurat, the camp on top of Babylon, these were not separate. They were one operation, and this operation was preemptive. The United States had moved before Saddam could finish what he was doing. Now, of course, Saleh had no inside source for any of this. He didn't claim to, because he was doing what a lot of you and I do. We're just pattern matching. He was looking at what was available on public record and just proposing his interpretation of it. The Anunnaki framing, the ancient Sumerian deity class who, in some interpretive traditions, were associated with celestial origin. And he sort of folded in as the underlying mythological frame, but he was very careful in the paper about distinguishing what was documented from what was his hypothesis. Eventually, he did finish the paper, and he uploaded it to a website called Bibliotheca Pleiades, which was one of the main early exopolitics archives on the internet. And he sent it out across his subscriber list, and the paper entered circulation late 2003-ish. Now, due to the claims of this, the Pentagon did not respond, the State Department didn't respond, Task Force 20, of course, didn't respond. I mean, no major press outlet picked the paper up or even picked it up in order to debunk it. There was really no skeptical takedown in the Washington Post, and it had kind of just been forgotten about. Until, in June of 2007, in a hotel room in Las Vegas, Nevada, a man named Dan Burish sat down across from 2 researchers who ran a website called Project Camelot. Now, this was and still is a website run by Carrie Lynn Cassidy and Bill Ryan, who are 2 researchers specializing in long-form interviews with self-described whistleblowers. And their format was relatively simple. Cassidy and Ryan would set up a camera in a hotel room. They'd sit a person down across from them.
How comes I hadn't heard of these 2 people before, man? Listen, let me know. Do they have 2007, he said. Do they have a podcast, or have they just got this website? I might have to check it out and see if they've got any, hopefully the interviews they've got are video format and not just audio or written down, but I'll have to check that out. And if there is video format videos of these 2 interviewing whistleblowers, I'll check it out and post it.
And they let that person talk for as long as they want to, with no editing. They don't challenge them. They don't try and fact check them. They would just let the interview run for several hours at a time. And when they were finished, they would upload it to projectcamelot.org.
Renowned for his expertise and compassion, unlock your future with accurate predictions. Reunite with loved ones.
And it would just sit there on public record, available for anybody to watch. So Burish, he sat down, he turned on his microphone, and he began to talk. Now, who Burish was, that was sort of the first contested question of the entire interview. Because according to Burish, he was a former Area 51 microbiologist. He had worked on something called Project Lotus and something called Project Aquarius. He had been briefed, he said, by the innermost circle of what was sometimes referred to as Majestic 12, which is the alleged committee that, according to a small but persistent
Majestic 12, isn't that the, what is it, Project Blue Book? Majestic 12, wasn't that like what Project Blue Book was before it was Project Blue Book? I don't know. I could be getting it mixed up with something else. Let's find out. The
body of conspiracy literature had been overseeing the United States government's classified relationship with extraterrestrial phenomena since, like the late 1940s? The Majestic 12 briefings he described are all unverifiable by definition as well. So when Burrish sat down in that hotel room in June of 2007 and began talking, he was not talking from a position of confirmed institutional credibility. He was talking from a position of contested institutional credibility. And what Burrish said next was basically a story. He told Cassidy and Ryan that an international coalition, and he was very specific, he named the United Nations, the European Union, and NATO, had over the previous years decommissioned at least 50 man-made devices around the world. These devices, he explained, were capable of accessing what he called natural Einstein-Rosen bridges. Now in physics, an Einstein-Rosen bridge is the technical term for a wormhole, a hypothetical shortcut through space-time predicted by general relativity. Never observed, but mathematically consistent.
I love how this video has been structured, because at the beginning you're like, well, how is this all leading to a Stargate? And now we're getting there. But fuck, man. So he's saying these little cylinder devices could create little wormholes. Is that what he's saying? Little personal portable teleportation devices. This is kind of silly.
With the equations. Now, what Burrish was claiming is that these were not theoretical objects. They were actual operational locations. There were natural ones in very specific places on the Earth. And human beings had, at least according to him, built devices that could access them. And, surprise, the government knows about them. And then Cassidy asked the question, was Iraq one of those locations? And Burrish's answer, on camera, on record, was, oh, absolutely. Now, he was very specific about the technology. The decommissioned Stargate, as Burrish described it, broke down into three components. You see, there was a projection component, there was a ring component, and there was a barrel component. And he said the looking glass technology, which is its own deep rabbit hole in the literature, had been back engineered from the Stargate technology using data extracted from a specific kind of source material. And that source material, in Burrish's account, was Sumerian cylinder seals. Just like I said before, they were not decorative artifacts, they were reverse engineered schematics. Technical documentation pressed into clay many, many, many years ago, encoded in the iconography of the earliest written language on Earth.
So the cylinders are the blueprints. And they teach you how to build it, I'm guessing. So that's why they wanted the cylinders. Let's go.
And it just so happens that the 5,000 seals from the museum in the Burrish's account were the documentation set. And he said that there is no doubt whatsoever when it comes to the looking glasses and when it comes to the Stargate technology that it has been decommissioned. Well, the footage has been uploaded to projectcamelot.org and the transcript followed, and it stayed there. Now, Burrish also had a lot of things on his side because he had specific technical details, the broader institutional shape that Salah had hypothesized about 4 years earlier. He just kind of got a lot of things right. I mean, Salah had even said that these cylinder seals were the target. Burrish said they were the schematics. Salah had said that the operation was preemptive. Burrish said the decommissioning was global. So if this was really nothing more than two unconnected accounts, a researcher and an alleged whistleblower, 4 years apart, neither with any institutional acknowledgement behind them, you could, technically close this and walk away, because the exopolitics forums have thousands of stories like it. Pattern matchers and self-proclaimed insiders, both unverifiable. Except that the institutional shape Salah had hypothesized about in 2003 was 14 years later, get this, confirmed by the United States Pentagon.
Wait,
it just so happens that in December of 2017, the New York Times broke a story, which was that the Pentagon had been running for over a decade a classified program called ATIP, otherwise known as the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Now, the budget was around $22 million, and the senator who had pushed for this program and protected it from being defunded was Senator Harry Reid, the Democrat from Nevada. The director of the program had been a Pentagon counterintelligence official named Luis Elizondo.
Okay, but what's this got to do with the Stargate? Or am I missing something here?
Excuse me? You're reading wrong. Put these on.
Bitch, you're
Show me your
reading
book.
wrong.
I'm gonna take a picture of it.
And that man, Elizondo, only 2 months prior, in October of 2017, actually resigned from the Department of Defense. And he resigned by his own public statement in protest of how the Pentagon was treating what ATIP had been studying. At the time, people sort of assumed that those first few weeks after the New York Times article ran, that ATIP had been studying UFOs or lights in the sky. It's the kind of thing that you would expect a classified Pentagon program with that name to be studying. But the more the disclosure unfolded over the following months, the clearer it became that ATIP had not just been studying lights in the sky. Because the ATIP funding chain, when it was eventually traced, ran through a Defense Intelligence Agency contract called AWASP. Well, not really, but it's short for the Advanced Aerospace Weapons System Applications Program. The DIA had awarded AWASP to a private aerospace company called Bigelow Aerospace. And we all know that to be owned by a man named Robert Bigelow, who is none other than a real estate billionaire. And guess what else he does? Not only does he own an aerospace...
He's super interested in UFOs. I think he's got a whole UFO program thing that he invests in. And I think, doesn't he make rockets?
Space company, but he also owns Skinwalker Ranch. And in fact, he didn't just buy Skinwalker Ranch, he turned it into his own private research site. From 2008 to 2010, under that same contract by AWASP, the United States government, through Bigelow's company, was paying scientists and former military contractors to live and document what was happening there. And what they documented was the entire spectrum of what the majority, the general public, refer to as paranormal phenomena. We're talking shadow creatures, werewolves, Bigfoot, all sorts of sci-fi interdimensional stuff going on, poltergeist activity, objects moving on their own, light anomalies, things that defy our realm of physics. So we know that there was definitely something going on there, and it was being heavily documented. So, look, we can really look at this in two ways. Sala in 2003 pattern matched on public reporting and got lucky on the broader shape. Right? He guessed and the shape turned out to be there. As for Iraq specifically, the cylinder seals, the basement level breach, the tanks that didn't intervene, none of that is in any of the disclosed ATIP files. None of it has really been independently confirmed by any institutional source. Burrish's 2007 interview was, I guess in this reading, a fabrication that just happened to align with Sala's hypothesis because Burrish had happened to read that hypothesis. So really it's coincidence plus the human tendency to find patterns in the noise. Now, the other one is that there's actually truth in this. Sala in 2003 was reading a real institutional pattern, the same one that 14 years later, the Pentagon would be forced to disclose. Burrish in 2007 was a real corroborator with real internal knowledge, which is why his 3-component breakdown of the technology was as specific as a...
So far, bro, I'm really not sure what to think about this one. There's a minute left of the video. I really hope that he clears it up a little bit more.
Was. The Iraq case is real. The 5,000 SEALs were extracted because they were what the operation was after. And the reason the ATIP files do not mention Iraq is that the Iraq operation was held back from disclosure. It was simply compartmentalized at a higher classification. So, folks, what do you guys think? I'd love to know your thoughts. And because you guys made it this far, I want you to all comment down below Stargate, so that way I know who made it to the end and who didn't. And if you guys enjoy storytelling like...
Boys, I have no idea what the fuck is going on. I don't think that they was fucking around with Stargate. But I do think that they was doing something. But I think it's probably more to do with wealth. I don't think it's got anything to do with crazy shit like fucking teleporting and shit. I think it's something. I think money. It's always money. It's just money. That's all it is. Everything's about money. I don't know though. What do you guys think? Listen, if there's something I'm missing, because I feel like I'm missing a lot from this video. I'm not sure why. But it's early in the morning for me. I've just woken up. Okay, so I got a bit of bedhead. Eyes look weird. I'm super tired. I feel like I've missed a lot in this video. Please leave your comments. Let me know what I missed. If there's anything specific you guys want me to react to as well, let me know down below. And fucking, yeah, we'll get straight to it. See you on the next one.